When I get goosebumps in a movie, it feels truly magical. The literal, physical representation of your immersion in the story. Your body responds in a way that gives you chills and hits you to your core. I've always wondered why some movies do it to me so much, and others, although I love them, just don't. Lord of the Rings, however, gets me more in this way, more than any other films. The goosebumps come in tenfold, and I've started to understand why. I've become very aware as of late that the scenes I love, the scenes that stay with me, that cause those emotional reactions, those goosebumps, comes with the sound. I'm finding where I once thought that when the music was at its peak and the loudest, it brought the most emotion, I'm understanding that in the quiet and with those sound effects, it can bring just as powerful of a moment, if not more powerful. Now, filmmakers are always afraid of just adding nothing, letting the silence speak for itself. That's why these days we get films that are 90% musically scored. Ryan Gosling once said he didn't believe The Notebook was sad. He thought the music was. Now, don't get me wrong, music does bring emotion, but it shouldn't be used as a crutch. Look at No Country for Old Men, which is a cinematic masterpiece. The action scenes are riveting. The Coen brothers leave the movie unscored and largely without music. This scene from another director may have sounded like this. Leaving a movie unscored is daunting because it brings such detail to your sound effects. But it's important to note there is never true silence in the world. Like if I cut out the sound for this video briefly, like this, you might hear fans, a hum from a fridge, or even some voices in the background. Silence still has sound. Peter Jackson uses this in two ways. First, that's silence. He builds up dramatic tension with it. Honestly, you could write a book about how Helm's Deep builds tension, but I think the scenes leading up to the battle are actually the most impressive. It has me at the edge of my seat. What brings this isn't the army at the end of the gate or humans running around. It's the audio and the stillness. When they're sitting, waiting for the battle, we hear the little sounds of Helm's Deep. The creaking, the night air blowing, we see them waiting. Much more than any dialogue could do, the buildup is set up by this silence and the uncomfortable nature of it. I've never been in a room with hundreds or even thousands of people where I could hear as much as I can now. The stillness, it becomes even more apparent when we hear the screams of the orc in contrast to the silence. Silence in film is a tool. And like every other tool, it needs to be used in the right places. Like in The Mines of Moria, as Pippin messes up and we hear those sounds through the corridors and the echoes, it's a silence afterward that builds that tension. We're listening to every single little creak in that room. We largely make films that simulate life. So essentially, we have to recreate those sound effects in a studio. This type of sound design is called Foley, and it's done by a Foley artist. And like I said, the main purpose is to mimic reality. On set, audio is more focused on dialogue and the actors and catching exactly what is said. So when it comes to post-production, those sword hits to the armor clanking all needs to be put in separately and are recorded separately. Like every other movie, Lord of the Rings largely has Foley in every scene to root us in reality, so we feel based in a real world. Even in slow motion, we hear naturalistic sounds. But when it comes to those big moments, majority of films do this. They drop out that naturalistic sound in favor of the soundtrack, because soundtrack brings emotion. Lord of the Rings, however, does something that I love. They drop the voices, but they focus in on the smallest details and the smallest sounds. They bring individual specific sounds to the forefront. Rather than everything we would normally hear, we're soloing in. They don't give you a naturalistic approach to the scene, but they hone in on what matters, those small details, and they help build the emotion through those attention to those small details. Like in the scene where Gandalf falls, we hear the sound effects of Gandalf falling, the dust, the scream from Frodo.
Fly, you fools!
Frodo's haunting scream is soloed out in the mix. But more importantly, the portion afterwards, we only hear faint sounds of arrows flying by their heads. It's almost like it's in a dreamlike state. It shows the disconnection of the surroundings and their focus on the lost. It isn't based in reality anymore. It's based in the characters' minds. Those sound effects are still there, but they're almost passing you by. In the most emotional points in your life, the ones that really affect you, losing a loved one, anticipating some sort of fate, or a triumphant moment of winning maybe the big game, life is kind of still taking place all around you, but you're really not a participant. You're soloed in. It's almost as if those sounds become clouded in the moment. They become distant and slow. I believe this is what Peter Jackson is doing, and what he's trying to accomplish with the sound mix. Jackson chooses this time and time again to include those Foley sounds, but in a very specific nature.
Come, sing me a song.
Like one of my favorite moments from the trilogy, Pippin's song, Edge of the Night.
The world ahead.
The film doesn't rely on this beautiful melody. When we cut away from that room, we hear the smallest sounds of the battle to come. We hear those faint gallops, panting from horses, an arrow being drawn. Single sound effects at a time. We don't see any violence at all.
Cloud and shade.
But it's the sound effects and Denthor eating. The sound, not the visuals, build that tension. Now the sound effects in the Foley on Lord of the Rings is always at the forefront of the mix. Like the uneasiness of being in the prancing pony, or the horses that the Nazgul ride as they hone in. Lord of the Rings is an amazing trilogy, which gets to me every single time I watch it. I'm not saying that the sound effects are the main reason I love it. They are a major tool that Peter Jackson knows how to use and uses it incredibly well throughout the series. These sounds build up the scene. They drive the emotion, the void of sound to build up tension, the focus on specific sounds to develop the importance. These simple tricks help amplify Lord of the Rings and help the greatness transcend into a masterpiece. So are there any other films that stand out to you in terms of sound effects and Foley? Like Fight Club always stood out to me, specifically in the Angel Face scene. As always, thank you to my patrons, Adam Gray, Jeremy Jacobs, Jenny Edwards, Jeremy Robson, Gabe Marchanda, Trevor Cowan, Gunnar Legland, Colleen West, Estet Hamzaj, Marco Perry, Roland, Aidan McShane, Shalon Hudson, Kieran Hunt, George Conan, Brandon Warner, Sweevy, and Alex Tao. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.
They're taking the hobbits to Isengard!